huge.
Unani machbig miqa, unani machbig miqa, agayutamqa payuk lagakut, aya 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 ay, yuslach kamp nun slot moon ye unani machbig miqa, agayutamqa payuk lagakut, aya 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 ay, yuslach kamp nun slot moon ye awani tirpag miqa kingunach putka alach kumasrut malingas ruki ilaku hasruki aya 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 ay, yuslach kamp nun slot moon ye unani machbig miqa, agayutamqa payuk lagakut, aya 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 ay, yuslach kamp nun slot moon ye Lingranach durch machbim chautaya kuchtura kamki ungubat kamp nun mani nun nami tatlikakur, aya 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 ay, yuslach kamp nun slot moon ye unani machbig miqa, agayutamqa payuk lagakut, aya 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 ay, yuslach kamp nun slot moon ye
Good evening and welcome to Native Life. This is a special edition. We're going to be covering the Indigenous Climate Justice Symposium at Evergreen University in Olympia, Washington. And the song you just heard was Ocean Prayer by Pamyua, who is an Alaskan group, and they were thanking the ocean for all of its gifts that it gives to the people. We're going to be, the event that we're going to be at this evening is a longhouse that is built in the Northwest Coast style. The inspiration for building the longhouse came from Mary Hilaire. She's the one that brought Indigenous studies to Evergreen State College. She's the founder of Native American Studies, and we have a short clip of her life and the contributions that she gave to the college. John, if you could roll up, please.
She just loved to bring out, to notice what was happening in people's brilliant minds. She was the Napoleon. She brought the
goodness out in the people.
That dream of hers still continues to be implemented, and it'll go on for lifetime after lifetime after lifetime.
And that is the single, solitary, most important objective is that no one be denied an education that will benefit them. That is the beginning and the end of Native American studies as I perceive it, as an educational tool to speak to the charge of this college to serve different people better.
Mary Ellen Hilaire taught in the Native American Studies program at Evergreen State College from the school's opening in 1971 until her death in 1982. During those 11 years, she was a tireless advocate for Indian students within the college. Mary saw Evergreen's special mandate and flexibility as an opportunity to create a unique higher education program for the state's Native American population. She wanted a parallel school within Evergreen, based on Native American values and traditions and designed for Native American students. The possibilities for real change at this alternative institution were immediately apparent to Mary.
In my mind, the main problem in higher education is the absence of the ultimate authority for excellence. And as an educator, I feel the people who are not only the generators of the values of Native American people, but who establish the main direction and intention of our culture are the elders. And of course, for the past 200 years, grievously so, the elders have been not only absent, but rejected from this position.
Mary taught that the four foundations of learning for Native students were music, talk, dance, and art. These were the disciplines that each student must be versed in to have a complete education. She brought weavers, storytellers, and dancers into the classrooms.
The four disciplines that we have talked about have been completely drawn like true threads through all your talk. The first one is Indian music, which in the literary sense is the Indian stories, because a lot of them are interchangeable. Then Indian dance, that is the art form of Indian people, and then what we call talk, which engulfs and involves everything that has communicative qualities. And then the last is art, which I feel has been performed from the symbolizing of ideas that have come from ideal relationships. And it's astounding how compact these have been as they are defined in the values and the culture and the attitudinal history of Indian people, and they've been sustained. They've pulled right through. Dedicated to the care and the service of Native American people of this state, designed to allow them to maintain the cultural heritage the beautiful character of past communities and reestablish within the federal and state governments a relationship that will redefine the sovereignty that lives in our hearts, the culture that we did not surrender, and the future for our young people, aspiring to be all that is in them to become.
She delivered her message in a very straightforward way and continuous, and she would talk for hours. And so we'd come in like at 9 or so in the morning and sit down, and sometimes class didn't let up even for a lunch break until 1 or 2 in the afternoon. And she just held us, me anyway, I was spellbound. It was wonderful.
It is through our hope in the direction that this institution and institutions like it can manage the change that will allow such hospitality, that will be dedicated to such hope as to maintain the steady voice of Indian culture in this land. Again, this land that's our land.
In the late 70s, Mary began to discuss the idea of a longhouse at Evergreen. She envisioned a Native American center where all people would be welcome to come, talk, eat, celebrate, and learn. Her hope was that people from different backgrounds could come together and establish what she called a footing of mutual understanding.
And one day we hope that within the intrinsic building composition of this institution, we will build a home for Native American people. In this hope, we kind of designed this place as though one might, closing their eyes, see the character, the nature, and the symbol of our way of living together. Some call it a longhouse, some call it a roundhouse, some call it a smokehouse, which is dear to my way of thinking, because that's what we called our homes. But whatever it was called, it defined the practical responsibility of hospitality.
After Mary's death, some of her students redoubled their efforts to get the longhouse built. 13 years later, the building was finally completed. Today it stands as a testament to Mary's legacy at Evergreen and to the vision she inspired in others. Her life, I think, never ends. I think it's her dream certainly will never end. Her life, we mention her name every time we meet in the longhouse. This is the first state college that ever build a longhouse on their college, and that's a recognition of our Indian people. That's a great event that took place here in Evergreen College. This college is very unique. Mary knew that, and tried to set it in the institution in a way to involve Indian tribes and Indian people. Today we have satellites out on reservations. We're educating our people out there. None of this could be done if we all weren't working together and recognized each other and respected one another. It's very important that we keep talking like this, and we keep making educational tools like this that's being made right now to talk about one of our great ladies, and that was Mary Hilaire.
And I feel that most education, if it's going to be functional, is community composition, how people learn to live with each other, establishing the kind of value system, designing the relationships or the culture, and establishing a freedom of attitude that will allow people again to address the three concepts: identity, group loyalty, individual authority.
Muted.
So that's a little bit about Mary Hilaire, who is the person who inspired the Longhouse that we'll be watching the event in this evening, and a little bit about the university as well. We'll also be listening to Tom Goldtooth, who's doing the keynote speech, and he's the executive director of the Indigenous Environmental Network, and that's headquartered at Bemidji, Minnesota. And for over 30 years, he's been an environmental and economic justice leader in the Native American community. He's spoken about congressional climate change bills and Native American efforts to address resource extractions. And we've talked a bit about those during the last 5 weeks, because, of course, that causes environmental degradation in the Native communities. He was a student at Arizona State University in 1971. And was honored in 2010 by the Sierra Club and the NAACP as a Green Hero of Color. He's represented the rights of Native peoples at the international level through UN treaty-making bodies and conventions on persistent organic pollutants, or POPs, global warming, biodiversity protection, mineral extraction, and water resources. He was recently awarded the Gandhi Peace Award, and that's a prestigious award, and it's given out annually on selected recipients for their outstanding contributions to world peace. And the award started in 1960 by the National Organization Promoting Enduring Peace. He was born in 1956, so he's not a young man. He is also known for co-producing an award-winning documentary film called Drumbeat for Mother Earth, and that details the effects of bioaccumulation chemicals on indigenous communities. The film was called highly informative but disturbing by the Chicago Tribune, and was recognized as Best Environmental Documentary at the New York International Independent Film and Video Festival, and as Best Environmental Social Justice Film at the Earth Vision Environmental Film Festival. So he's a very entertaining speaker. He's he has a lot of knowledge, a wellspring of knowledge, and it's going to be a very, very interesting speech. I see that we've got some things moving around in the venue. The introduction will be a welcoming song, which, as you know from my broadcasts, it's traditional to start and end things with songs. And it's going to be the song is going to be given by the Nisqually Family Drum Group, and I'm kind of looking forward to it. I know just a little bit about the Northwest Coast tribes. I don't know a whole lot, and I'm looking forward to learning things myself. Does anybody have any questions before we get started? Because this is going to be a fairly long presentation. I've never heard of Simon Gertie. Grandma Christine. I don't know who that person is. And I'm looking here to see if anybody else has any questions about things. We appreciate everyone showing up, of course. Uh, in other news, I see that President Obama has been meeting with natives and at the 2015 Tribal Nations Convention or Conference, and there's some YouTube stuff out on that. And then he's also come out in support of dropping Native American mascots, which is something that I've worked on and worked towards in the past few years. As I'm getting closer to being of retirement age, I have a little more free time to get involved in some of the activism things that when you're raising a family and worrying about a career that you can't quite get into. So I'm glad to hear that he is actually coming out and lending some a voice to that movement. Let's see, is there see if there's any more questions here. Yeah, there's another question. President Obama was adopted by the Crow tribe, and he has an Indian name. And adoption doesn't mean that he is an Indian. It just means that it's one of those you're given a gift, but it's the gift of responsibility. And when he took on the adoption, he also took on the responsibility of championing his family's and the Native American causes. And he had a lot of support in Indian country. He hasn't always done the things maybe that we would like to see him do, but like for instance signing the defense bill with Oak Flat in it. But there's other things that like trying to keep the KXL from going forward are things that Native Americans appreciate. So I realize that being a leader is a balancing act. Generally, if everybody's mad at you, you've probably made the right decision. But there's, it's a mixed bag, and I'm sure everyone feels that way about any elected official, because since they represent everyone, and you have your own personal point of view, and they have theirs. Other people have theirs. They have to represent all of the people, which doesn't necessarily mean that you get what you want all the time. He has made Native American issues more prominent. He started a summit that takes place every year where all of the tribes get together and bring their issues to him. Something that hadn't gone on in prior administrations. I believe he even has a position on his advisory council for Native Americans. I saw that lady from Fond du Lac has been appointed to that council. Ojibwa lady, yes, I was reading that earlier today on Indian Country News. So that's kind of what's going on. We're seeing more stuff going on here. It looks like they're running on Indian time. That's one of the big jokes amongst us, is that we kind of sort of have a time that we get things together and it gets going when it needs to get going. Is anybody speaking yet, or do we have sound, or John?
No, I'm not any sound yet.
Okay, no sound yet. As I see the professor up there, and I'm assuming that's going to be the speaker for the introduction.
Yeah, let everybody know that, or I'll let everybody know because they can hear me. Rich Green is there for us, and it's really nice for him to take his time down there for this. He's got his laptop set up, but we're probably not going to get a good audio feed. We're really hoping that the ambient sound is good enough, but we don't have access to the audio out on the board. So if the audio turns out to be bad, guys, we're just going to cut in and tell you we apologize. Thanks.
Okay, well, looks like everyone is assembling here. So I'm not as good as some of the other hosts at vamping. I'm better at answering questions. If people have questions, that would be just really awesome. You kind of bail me out here. Talk a little about human trafficking in Indian tribes. Are you talking about currently? We have a lot of problems with that up in the oil field. It's one of those things that comes with extractive industries. We have the incidence of rapes goes up. The incidence of people getting actually abducted off the reservations and disappearing. There's a hashtag MMIW, which is murdered and missing Indigenous women. There are over 1,500 such cases in North America. That includes those that have happened in Canada as well. But we have our share of that number of 1,500 in the United States. And it generally, if you watch where there used to be a map. Somebody was paying to host a database, and there was a map of all of the spots where these were taking place. And it basically follows the boom towns. Wherever the man camps are is where that sort of thing is going on. It's a big problem. The new VAWA, the Violence Against Women Act, does expand the provisions. I just started reading some of it last night, and they're talking about one of the problems is that if you're not a native member of a particular tribe on that reservation, then their legal system cannot touch you. So say you're Cherokee and you're living on a Navajo reservation, you beat the heck out of some Navajo girl, they can't do anything about you to pick you up and hand you over to someone, to an authority outside of the reservation. And the problems with trying to collect evidence and get people to testify and so on, and a lot of this stuff just slips right underneath the underneath the bridge, and nothing ever comes of it. Even if the woman does press charges, who do you press charges with? You've got tribal courts, you've got federal courts, you've got state courts, and a lot of it has just, nothing has happened. Another problem, even if you want to call it human trafficking, is the subversion of ICWA, which is the Indian Child Welfare Act, which is supposed to keep Indian children within their tribe. And what's happening in places like South Dakota, the United government will give the state of South Dakota an extra $50,000 a year for every Native child that they have in foster care. So guess what happens? There's a big incentive for the welfare workers to pipeline Indian children into the welfare, into the foster care system to get that extra $50,000 a head. And there are all kinds of cases, and you can just Google search that stuff going on, where children have been out and out abducted from not problematic families, just because the welfare worker says there's a problem here. They come in and they take the children and they put them in foster care so the state can get more money. So that's, to me, that's human trafficking too. But that's, a whole nother thing. So thank you very much for that question or statement. Traffic alerts. We have our share of issues with trafficking, both legally and illegally. What would Senator Sanders have to do to be adopted by an Indian tribe? First of all, you'd have to find a family that would felt moved to do this. This isn't something that you could pressure someone into doing. Someone would have to feel that that was something that needed to be done. And then, of course, Senator Sanders would have to be approached to see if this was something he would be interested in. And the tribe would have to get involved to find out if this is someone that they wanted to have as a relative. So there's a number of different pieces in this kind of a delicate dance to get adopted by an Indian tribe. I don't think with Senator Sanders you'd need to hold his feet to the fire. I live outside of D.C. and I've been here for 15 years, and I have observed Senator Sanders. And the man is, as some of his colleagues have said in various tones of admiration and exasperation, that he is as honest as the day is long. And if he says he's going to do something or not do something, he will tell you that, and then he will stick to it. His message has been consistent for 35 years. If he has to vote against something that he said that, you know, he was in favor of because it was a bad law, or somebody stuck a rider in there or whatever to let's say, like with the defense bill, to give away Oak Flats to a foreign mining company, he would come out and say it was a bad law. It needed to have this and that done, and so I voted against it. Because that's just the kind of legislator that I have observed him to be long time before he ever said that he was running for anything other than when he went from the House to the Senate. So, yeah, it's all about some form of wealth transfer. That's what Celeste Holmes said. I agree. John Trudeau makes a point that it's all about maximizing the profit. That is their only life value, is to maximize the profit. And when your only life value is to make more money, you see everything in terms of money. You see the land in terms of money. If the land isn't making you money, then, you know, you're not employing the land properly. And, you know, we don't see things that way. We don't see that, we see the land as something that we take care of and that takes care of us. And I think it's a different point of view that needs to be propagated in this country with the coming climate change and stuff. We need to really, everybody needs to change their point of view. We need to figure out that there are things that we need because we want them, and there are things that we need because we need them, and we need to get back to knowing the difference between the two of those things. So are we about ready to go now, or we're still getting set up?
Well, some good news, Pat.
Yeah?
Yeah, Rich Green says he's got a mic set up, separate mic set up, near what we hope will be good audio from a speaker. So we're hopeful that it's going to happen. Looks like there's somebody up there. He said he will unmute as soon as it actually starts, so you just have to vamp.
I just have to vamp some more.
Yeah, I can cut back to this scene. We can keep it on this.
Okay.
If you want to vamp, you want to talk about the Network of the 99 crowdfund real quick. Bring in Sherry. Say hey real quick.
Okay, that sounds good. Sherry?
Hi. We've got some people on the comment board. Let's see. Simon Deathrow says, I learned next to nothing about Native heritage in school. It's sad as a part of Cherokee Blackfoot, but you really have to go to a reservation for that. We would do that in the summer, and those were good times. So what do you think about that, Pat?
Well, in Washington State this year is the first year they passed a law requiring that the schools K through 12 include Native American history, and not Native American history written by white people, but actually.
The room, so please take a seat, and we will get started.
Guys, I'm gonna cut in, Pat.
Okay. See you guys later.
I think they're going to get started in about a minute. Was that audio any good?
Yeah, it wasn't that bad. We'll have to hear a little bit more, but it wasn't so bad, Rich. So another minute.
All right, they're going to get started in a minute, so I'll fiddle around and see what I can do for you guys.
Thank you. All right, you heard it, Pat. We got about another minute.
Okay, so another minute. The Washington State school system has instituted it's a law now that they have to teach so much Native American history, government, cultures. You guys live in teepees. You don't have to pay any taxes. You know, there's all kinds of myths.
Here we go, Pat.
We're started.
Well, good evening. We want to welcome you here tonight to this symposium.
Sorry, folks, we've lost audio. We'll try to get it back. And there we go. Thank you, Rich Green.
Good evening. Been asked to come up and say a few words. My name is Byron Nicholai. My name is Kalash. I'm part of the Medicine Creek Band of Indians. My mother's father is Janet, John Nicholai. When you talk about environment change, you talk about the change in our way of life, of fresh water, fresh air. Is to talk about people that stood up and made a change, like in the fishing rights. In 50 years, the people stood up and said something about fresh water. But without salmon, without fresh water, we would not exist. So we, the people from the salmon, people of the water, the Northwest, people that harvest salmon, here know the environment. First time this year I've seen the Swan River so low. First time I've seen the Mount Rainier so bare. Back in the time in 1854, there was another warrior that stood up, and that was Chief Leshner. He knew that something was going to happen to this great paradise land that he was the caretaker of. He made the treaty of 1854. Behind the treaty they couldn't read. But in that treaty it talks about Medicine Creek, the water. And the water of the Northwest is a sacred. You don't see this water, you breathe this air. The people who fight for climate change, they're willing to stand up and make a change. You're willing to stand up and make a change. Don't be scared. When you work for the Creator, you stand up and fight for Mother Earth. You're protected. You have to believe that in your heart. Because we're the only mammals on this earth that have a brain and have a mighty, mighty heart that pumps sacred blood into that brain. And through all that, that's power. Power, not being scared to stand up and be accountable for your little time on Mother Earth here. And while you're here, you enjoy that water. So I honor these people that stood up and said, enough's enough. And scattered this black powder amongst our people, coal or the oil. So environmentalist people are people who stand up, are people who are taught at a young age. You're taught that. It's not something you just drink. In your heart, you're taught that respect of Mother Earth in the native way is what I was taught. That's what I believe in my heart. That's what got me this far. Belief. Belief in yourself. Believe we can make a difference. You damn right we can. Yeah. And with that power in mind, and people that get up and speak and share that and willing to share it with an open heart and fire in it, because that's what's going to take. Because we're up against the most powerful people in the world, man. That's us natives, we know. We had prayer, we had belief, we had hope. Now I see there's a lot of people with that same belief. It's not about being native, it's about human beings, it's about survival of a human being now. It's about our water, it's about our air, about all of us. One dies, we all die, man. That's what happens. I have my son up here to say a few words too. Well, thank you for your time. Thank you for everything.
My name is Hanson McLeod. Pawikwadai is what they call me on the res, but son of Don McLeod and Joyce McLeod, of course, grandson of Janet and Don McLeod Sr. I'm captain of the canoe family. I work down there at the Culture Center, what we call the Braggett Farm, and that sits right next to on the railroad tracks. So my concern, or what I was taught and raised in that whole environmental fishing rights, I'm the generation of that gets to, enjoy the water now where they didn't get to enjoy it back then. So I'm a buoy deck diver, I'm a fisherman, I'm a basket weaver, I'm a carver, I'm all that my grandma wanted us to be as kids. When she took us and tied us to the trees when they were trying to cut trees down in Yelm where she lived. And as little warriors that we were, she tied us all in hands around the trees that she didn't want cut down on her property in front of the road out in Yelm. So like my father said, when we start little, and then you continue that going with that. So that fight, that warrior that we see, these videos that we saw earlier today, that's who we are. So this issue at hand, when you talk about the cultures that not only run, when they show this video, and I tell this on our end because in the Squally, in the drinking water that goes all the way from, let's say, Olympia, Tumwater, Lacey, and Yelm, comes from McAllister Springs. And Coltrane run right next to that. You can throw a rock from where they get that water, where you're drinking, right next to that railroad track. So that issue at hand, when they talk about this, and they don't put that in any of their comprehensive emergency management plans or anything like that, or what do they have for us when this happens? So then, of course, when it's next to the reservation, we look at that. I was also, I did some education, I did some training with the emergency management department. That's another whole long story when you start talking about how they left the tribes out of all these emergency management plans, comprehensive emergency management plans. So the Squally tribe, my cousin Ken Choke, he runs that department. He brought me into that department for a few years. Took some of that training, but that training of that and incorporated with the tradition and culture that I was raised in, it gives me that knowledge base and that standpoint to say, enough's enough. This is where it's at. It's going right next to our drinking water. Not only for our reservation, but for this whole town and probably this whole half of the state over here. So that whole water down there and that pump house down there is coming back to the tribe, of course, after 60, 70 years of them occupying it. Now they're giving it back to the Nisqually tribe. But these coal trains, and the standpoint that we take on them, especially as the Squally people of the river. We're doing travel journeys. Travel journeys is another great atmosphere, a place where we teach our young kids about the culture and tradition and about what's ahead of them also and what to expect. So when you start thinking 7 generations ahead, that's what this travel journey is all about also. So we start incorporating that climate change, that environmental issues, the water quality testing and all that stuff that goes on in these canoe families within our Tribal Natural Resources Department is another great way of teaching our kids. So 2016, canoe journeys coming back down to this side of the Puget Sound. And our theme, which, I, as a family, my mom and my sister, we work in this department. She got a story from Grandpa Billy. So Grandpa Billy talked about Tocopma, which is Mount Rainier, which is Tocopma, is don't forget the water. So that's our theme and also our standpoint that we're taking with this journey about, bringing everyone to our area, talking about the water, and then talking about the treaty. So there's going to be a little Medicine Creek treaty ceremony that we're going to have to honor that treaty. And then, of course, we're bringing all the legislation, Patty Murray and everybody. They want to have this it's not really my cup of tea to start talking about politics and legislation and all that. But so anyway, so that cultural aspect is where a lot of the canoe family and a lot of the members of the community are going to start really highlighting that fight that we have that goes all the way up into our brothers up in Lummi. So it passes through our water, passes through our area, and probably one of the most devastated areas because of all the landslides that happen right outside of Squatchy Creek, Dew Pond. You go south of that area, you got these massive landslides that happen, always wiping it out. There was a train wreck right next to that watershed on the other side of the Nisqually River back in 2003 or 2004. Low key, they didn't tell us anything. All they said was diesel spilled into the water. So now, right there off the Old Pacific Highway and that bridge, they got people out there inspecting that bridge right now. So another thing is the infrastructure that we have in place over these railroad tracks. And how old are these railroad tracks? So they have a crew, and I watch this crew because I pass through that area every morning. And for the last 2 years, I've been watching this crew that is stationed right outside of that Old Pacific Highway railroad track. Bridge goes right over it. There's always a constant working crew there. That's where the train derailed back in 2000. I want to say 3 or 4, I'm not quite sure. But story, my dad was talking about it earlier today. My mom also told me about the story, but there was another area outside of McKenna over the river that happened back in the 80s, probably the early 80s. I was probably just a little kid, when my mom used to talk about it, how we used to play in that river up there because we stayed right up there next to that old folks retirement home. And the train, from my dad recalls, and someone was partying down there and started a fire underneath that bridge, caught that structure on fire, they put it out, but it weakened that structure. 2 days later, a train came through there, and it had that copper ore that goes to that smelting plant right outside of Commencement Bay. They shut that down, of course, too, and then they said there's no leakage or anything happening there either, right? So right there, that train was heading towards there when it derailed off that track, and it fell into that river. And then my dad is recalling these stories about there was a lot of trout and salmon there at the time. Now there's hardly anything above where we have all our hatcheries and everything right outside of McKenna. So great topic tonight. I love the issue. I'm always up for a talk and discussion about it. I want to thank everyone for coming here. I want to thank my canoe family for following me up here, helping us sing. The brothers that are here also, Native brothers here also to help with all this. Freddie Lane, I like your video. I want to get a copy of it, so I'll hit it.
Thank you very much. The students of the Resource Rebels group would like to show their appreciation, our appreciation, by presenting the Nisqually Canoe family with gifts. So if the students could please step up. These were gifts made by the students themselves with help from members of the culture group at the Cedar Creek Correction Center.
Just like this Indians all spread out, they get all there.
I'd like to thank the students for their time and generosity in preparing these gifts, and the Nisqually Canoe family for your generosity in sharing your music, your welcome, and words of wisdom. I'd like to introduce Kezia Wentworth, a member of the Squaxin Island tribe, as well as member of the Native Students Alliance, and she will be introducing our keynote speaker, Tom Goldtooth. Hello, everyone.
I am Kezia Whiteworth. I am a Squaxin Island registered native, and I also come from the KEYNOTE Nation as well. It is my pleasure to introduce the wonderfully inspiring Tom B.K. Goldtooth, who is the Executive Director of the Indigenous Environmental Network, based in Bemidji, Minnesota. He is Dining Navajo and Dakota Sioux, from a Native student leader in 1971 at Arizona State University, to a military tour in the U.S. Army to developing Native programs and social services. Tom has applied his professional and academic training in social network practice to build sustainable community development. His environmental justice leadership is the First Nation People of Color Environmental Justice Leadership Summit in 1991 in Washington, D.C., has continued to the UN Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues in 2009, and is a member of the International Indigenous Peoples Forum on Climate Change that operates as the Indigenous Caucus within the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. He has been awarded with recognition of his achievements throughout the past 35 years as an activist for social change within the Native American and environmental justice community. In fact, just yesterday, he received the Gandhi Peace Award. This prestigious award has been bestowed annually on select recipients for their outstanding contributions to world peace since 1960 by the National Organization Promoting Enduring Peace. Past recipients include such luminaries as Eleanor Roosevelt, Dorothy Day, Cesar Chavez, and most recently to Bill McKibben and Medea Benjamin. He also co-produced an award-winning documentary film, Drumbeat from Mother Earth, which addresses the effects of bioaccumulative chemicals on Indigenous peoples. Through the strength of his community organizing experience, he has brought to the local issues of environmental, economic, energy, climate, water, and food justice and the rights of Indigenous peoples to international level through the United Nations treaty-making bodies and conventions. He is also known for implementing innovative approaches for inspiring Native youth people and students to take leadership in building healthy, sustainable Native communities. It is my pleasure to welcome Tom Goldtooth.
It's like I just came off the airplane. Todd, is it on? Hello. So, say yat Say yat I can't hear you. Yat And say ha. Say it again. Okay. The women were saying ha. The women say ha. Ha. With a nasal N. Hello. Hello. Yat the Bethlejini nashne. Dakota oyate bashishichi. It's really good to be here once again, and especially to have these songs. I was sitting over there it was very appropriate to have these songs, because what I want to talk about tonight has to do with spirit. And through these songs, we're familiar with each other. We're familiar as native, as indigenous peoples of these territories, of these lands. Not only here where the sun goes down in the west, but also the people of the eastern door, the people of the eastern, where the sun comes up to the north, our relatives in the Arctic. And through my travels, I've been fortunate to meet the people of the Horn of Argentina, of the whole Western Hemisphere, the Americas. So we're all told that we have certain ways that have been passed on to us that are woven into our identification, that's woven into our face, our appearance, our words, our language. It's our DNA. And so I just wanted to thank them for the songs, because it activates the spirit. That's how we identify ourselves. Dakota Chaje, Matho Awanyakapi Mie. Matho Awanyakapi Mie. That's who I am. The trees and the plants, they will recognize me when I say my name. Matho Awanyakapi. That's me, Mie. That's my identification. So we have those, not just a teaching, it's original instructions of who we are. So those songs activate the spirit. It's a protocol so that we're able to talk about those sacred ways of our people. And I was thinking about what I was going to talk about, even though the agreement that I made with my friend here, Sultan, is crime against humanity and Mother Earth, in reference to the upcoming United Nations climate meeting in Paris, France. This is the 21st year that the world leaders are coming together in their long road of negotiation on how to mitigate a change in climate and global warming, and what are some of the tools and methodologies for adaptation, and all the other mechanisms that are involved in this terminology of mitigation and adaptation. This is the 21st year. For those of you that have kept track or studied the long history of these UN negotiations, and you look at the charts and the data, the concentration of greenhouse gases has not gone down on a global level. If there's any spikes in that chart in the United States, when the United States says, hey, you know, it's gotten better. We have to really look into the data. And there's other reasons why greenhouse gases may have gone down in a certain area in the United States, maybe related to the economy, related to other factors. Some of you are acknowledging this because you've done your homework. So this topic of crime against humanity and Mother Earth, I wanted to take this opportunity to talk about the spirit. I wanted to flip the discussion. I want to come back to some of the reasons why I'm saying we want to flip the discussion. I want to come back to an expression in the language that we understand as native, as indigenous peoples of the land, in a way that the common people, the peasants and the small farmers of the world and of this country, and the people who have that relationship with nature understand, hopefully, what I'm talking about. First of all, I want to thank the program here, the leadership here that made this possible. And thank you for inviting me. Yes, I did get this Gandhi Peace Award. I almost didn't go. And those of you that keep track of my Facebook page, okay? It is true, one of my daughters, Anna, she knew I was going because she kind of keeps track of her dad. Where are you going next, Dad? Because she's concerned. And so I said, I'm going to New Haven, Connecticut. And she said, what's going on there? And I could not bend the truth. She asked me, what are you going there for? And do I make something up? No. She had me, because those of you that follow our spiritual ways, you know, one of the teachings is that, you know, you got to be right and true and talk the truth. So I said, yeah, I'm going to receive an award. Then she asked, what kind of award? I said, oh, it's a peace award. And then eventually the Gandhi Peace Award. I said, oh, Dad, you know, you should tell people. I said, well, no, it's not my way. I don't tell people about these things, you know. So I finally decided to honor her, because she didn't understand. She wants to be proud of her father. I decided to post it on my Facebook. Yeah, so I had like, I don't know, 400 likes. And the comments, like 150 comments, you know. And it's a different world, social networking. One of the reasons I have a Facebook is when we formed the Indigenous Environmental Network, it was formed really for spiritual reasons, elders and youth. And some of those youth now are going into their 40s, eh? They're already gone through 30s. And so is the concept of accountability. We have to be accountable to community. There's enough lone rangers out there. They're not accountable. But one of the values that we have is woven into who we are. We're accountable to our family. We're accountable to our clan systems, our Teoshpais. We're accountable to our elders and our children. It's really easy to go out there if we want to do that and just speak our mind. But on the nature of these discussions that concern the future of not only our families and our clans and our nations, tribal nations, but the world, humanity, The question is, how are we accountable to ourselves? So the reason I put this Facebook together, it was another mechanisms of being accountable to tell people what I'm doing. Those of you that are doing a lot of beautiful work, you want to share some of that knowledge and things that you're doing. Sometimes it's difficult in the work that we do. Someone says, he's not here. He missed the ceremony. Or he missed this meeting. Where is he? What is he doing? So I have a Facebook. I have a Facebook, yes. And you got to keep it under 5,000. So if you notice, it's 4,999, 4,994. Those that do Facebook, you know why. The other thing I want to also recognize with this songs, and it is the songs that bring in the spirit, is accountability to the spirit. I remember Don's dad, Don McLeod, and his companion, his wife, Janet McLeod. A lot of the work that Janet did formed a lot of the Indigenous women's expression, coalitions and alliances. Coming out of that, the Indigenous Women's Network, for an example. I was just a young man at that time, 19 years old. When you're 19, sometimes you think you know it all. But it's these mothers and these aunties and these grannies that keep us in check. This young soldier boy. So we need people like that in our life to keep us accountable. And your mom was one of those. If she thinks I was out of line, she would say something. She would say something. And that's what we need. We need that. Otherwise we have this situation in Paris, in this Paris agreement that the world leaders are going to agree to. And what in our, not just my, but our, this collective of frontline communities of Indigenous peoples, Native people, not just here from Turtle Island, from North America, US and Canada, Alaska, but throughout the world. In our critical analysis, the agreement that's going to come out is not going to get us to where we need to go to prevent us from going over 2 degrees Celsius or even 1.5 degrees Celsius in consideration of our brothers and sisters of Africa. 2 degrees Celsius is going to be devastating to the people in Africa. The geography, the ecology is different. So how are these world leaders accountable in these negotiations? That is a question to ask. How are they accountable? A crime against humanity and Mother Earth. That's going to be part of our narrative. We're going to be spinning that. On accountability in song, it's recognition of those that have gone on. Billy Frank, I could say he was a friend of mine. He was older than I am. We never got to a place to where we would call me nephew or me uncle. In my lifetime, sometime I had older men were more like brothers. Other ones in this area, the revitalization in those years in the 70s, Joe Washington, in the lodge. I thought that was one of the most beautiful revitalization and strength of the ceremonies that were coming, building Joe Washington up north. I was just 19 years old. But like one of the young men said here, we were taught certain things when we were young. So that I already had that understanding. Accountability. We got that little, that video, it's the short one. Because this is the road to Paris. I'm going to talk about this. The red road to Paris and beyond. It's not going to stop. The movement of the indigenous resistance is alive and well. It's not idle anymore. It's good to see my other brother here, who used to be one of our board members of IEN, Jimbo Simmons, the American Indian Movement. Janet and Don, American Indian Movement. Sid Mills. A lot of these folks were at wounded knee. In the revitalization of the next generation from Pine Ridge, the youth, they have t-shirts, American Indian Movement Grassroots. That's the moccasins on the ground. Debbie White Plume, as one of the elders, she was a youth back then, revitalizing that warrior's blood, that DNA of resistance to protect the sacred of Mother Earth and Father Sky. One of the messages on a poster from the American Indian Movement Grassroots says, "Never been idle." Never been idle. So they're looking at this little. Do I need to do anything else? It's good. It's an international symbol. It's good. What we've been doing, this is it's a short piece, it's a trailer. There's a reason why this has been put together. And I'm going to go back into this, talking about this. When we were formed as Indigenous people coming together around the environment and building a network, just not in any organization again, but somehow a voice. literally.
We're working on getting the sound back.
To be a mechanism to empower our communities on the front line of resistance and struggle. And they already have the power, and say you already have the power. Whether it's mining, mineral extractive industry, deforestation, a toxic waste facility, a pulp and paper mill, you name it. We're on the front lines of receiving that toxic contamination. And our women, we started to find in the 90s, our women are carrying the accumulation of those chemicals in their body and in their breast milk. Toxics, organic compounds that bioaccumulate in the food system. So this compounding change, environmental and ecological compounding change, in addition to the changing climate. It's like a GPS layering. You peel away one, and there's another impact that we have to contend with. Our people are dying. So if we look back, and we're moving towards these United Nations climate negotiations, it was said by someone earlier, this has got to stop. We're not going to play your games anymore. We're not going to be idle no more. The indigenous resistance from the north to the south, we're going to be building the base of our grassroots. Our people from the Amazon right into the jungle. Because there's a bunch of false solutions that's coming. Already ripping away the heart of the people in the Amazon. When they say, we're going to get money, where are you going to get money from? We're going to get money for this being who we are. How are you going to get money? Well, they want us to measure trees. They're going to give us a clipboard and pencils, and we're going to measure trees. Why are you going to measure trees? Oh, they say that it has carbon in the trees. So as we look at this, we look at the NGOs, non-governmental organizations like Conservation International, the Nature Conservancy, WWF, Environmental Defense Fund. They're engaged in this mitigation of carbon markets, carbon offsets, telling the people in the Amazon, you're going to get money. We're going to pay you for being who you are, your traditional knowledge. Just live the way you live and protect the trees. But we find that there's concepts like social bosque. Now there are tree farming, tree parks, and indigenous people cannot go into their own territories to get trees and wood anymore. Who owns that now? The petroleum companies of the north. They're buying those trees through carbon credits, to greenwash, to offset the pollution that they're continuing to expand in the north, like the tar sands. Total operates in the tar sands. Total is French owned. So when we're in Paris, we're going to do a hit on Total. We're going to expose them. A carbon scam, a Ponzi scam. Climate capitalism at its worst. Shell, ExxonMobil, Chevron in Richmond, California. We have people of color, poor white folks are living there in Richmond, dying from respiratory illnesses. And the Chevron is expanding releases. But they say, we're good on paper because we are investing in conservation in trees in the global south. So one of the things I do talk about is the false solutions and how this is a crime against humanity and Mother Earth. So I went into the jungle. One of the tribes that we developed friendship with is the Seriyaku. And I had to go in a dugout canoe. It was like 6 hours along the river. Beautiful country. So on one of those nights, there's a dream that came. There's a woman that came. Her hair is almost all the way down to her ankles. And she came. In one of the translations, as I talked to the shaman down there and his wife, who's a healer, she knows all the medicines. Because she said, bring the indigenous woman of the north and our indigenous woman of the south together. The women who live along the rivers, like their people live along the river. The people who are dealing with this black liquid, the oil, bring them together. So they've been coming, they've been meeting together, and they formed a document. They have established themselves, and their voices, they formed a treaty agreement as defenders of Mother Earth, a treaty, not just a statement or a declaration, a treaty accord. Women from the tar sands, women from the Oklahoma, from Ponca, women from Alaska, women from the Mandan Hidatsa Rikra Dead Center in the Balkan. They're coming together. This is part of what they're saying too, no more. So, always gets to me every time I see it. Love. One of the words at the tail end is about love. One of my speech that I made in accepting the Gandhi Peace Award, and I'm very honored, I'm very thankful for that award and what Gandhi stood for, along with another picture with Martin Luther King. And the concept of peace is very important. And I was, again, there as I was here. I put up tobacco. I put up tobacco to help guide me on what I was going to say in those brief words. And I talked about peace. And I said, humanity cannot have peace with themselves. As individuals, you cannot have peace with yourself unless you have peace with Mother Earth. Unless you love Mother Earth and understand what your relationship is with the sacredness of that female creative principle of Mother Earth and Father Sky. So you go into a deeper dive into that. And that's why I talked about the concept of spirit. Because if humanity does not have that understanding, then whatever solutions are developed will revert back to being the problem. If humanity does not understand what that relationship they have with the sacredness of Mother Earth, with creation, with the natural laws. So we ask ourselves, in our Teoshpaes, our circles as Native, as Indigenous peoples, in our spiritual circles, why is it that they don't know their creation stories? Why is it that they don't know the creation stories? When I was talking to Oren Lyons, when I was talking to Jake Swamp and before he passed on, in our Diné Navajo, you talk to people about your relationship. And the word ke is that word that is a relationship. It identifies who you are and how you relate, not only within clan systems, but relation to the life itself. Or you heard the word Madakie Owasi, all my relations. Very spiritual word. We are related, but it goes deeper than that. And it's tied to understanding what our creation story is and our genesis. When the settlers came to our territories, they didn't ask us what we believed in. They didn't ask us if we had a concept of Genesis, of the beginning of time. They didn't ask us if we had song and ceremony, because somewhere in that maze, we were already identified as pagans. We were already identified as people without a soul. Without a soul. Because under the international laws of that time, there were international laws. How does a whole world come and occupy territories that are already inhabited? They need the church. They need the blessings of the church to say these people are not They're not civilized. They don't have a way of worship. They are pagans. They don't have a soul. That was the formation of the doctrines of discovery already being implemented in other parts of the world. Doctrines of discovery, using these concepts of conquest, but also marginalizing, not just marginalizing whole populations of people, that they don't have souls, whether it's the Aboriginal people of Australia, the Maori people of New Zealand, or the Adivasis, tribal peoples of India. They don't have souls. So in that same concept, they're taking a word, dominion. Dominion. That man has dominion over Mother Earth. It even has been utilized as man has dominion over the woman, over their wife. Dominion. Man has dominion over Mother Earth. What does that mean? I have been in some faith and some church groups, and there's still debates to this day of maybe that was a misinterpretation. Others believe over here that's how it is. It was said by the man upstairs. They have their own debates. So love was mentioned there. And also in some of the language in this trailer, we talked about the concept of the rights of Mother Earth. The rights of Mother Earth. It raises the question for those lawyers. Rights of Mother Earth. It even raises some questions within our Native community. We had to, in the long road of the formation and writing of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, there was a lot of debate on the word rights. Trying to understand that from an indigenous language perspective. So in some of the circles that we have created, to have this debate and dialogue as indigenous peoples around the concept of the rights of Mother Earth, we all come into consensus that we were born with this teaching of original instructions of how we relate and our responsibilities to the natural laws, the creative principles of living plants, the animals, the fish, the birds, life itself, even the smallest, unseen. And that goes into the realm of sacred language. The medicine people have that sacred language. And song. And song. So it's not a foreign concept to us. When I was in the territories of the Siriaco and the Sapara people in Ecuador, those elders were saying, we have given a mandate to send people out there to speak and to defend our rights of indigenous people, our rights here in the jungle. But they say, there's no difference between the rights of the woman of the forest, the Mother Earth, and the rights of the trees and the rights of indigenous people. It's all one and the same. And that's what said earlier. We're raised to believe and to understand what our responsibilities is as we walk on Mother Earth. How to make offerings, how to sing songs, how to offer up prayers. And another word and a concept that my older sister, Josephine Madaman, the corn woman, the Anishinaabe, she'd walked around every one of the Great Lakes carrying water in a little copper pail. She used the word petition. She petitions for the water. So why is it that we do this as Indigenous peoples? We do this because it's the way that we have been taught to love Mother Earth. We love Mother Earth. We learn to love ourselves. If we are separated from Mother Earth, from whatever cause of that, and there are causes that have removed us from Mother Earth as Native peoples, or anyone in humanity that has been removed from nature, it gets more difficult to understand what I'm talking about and the importance of this type of expression when we talk about climate. When we talk about climate. Because we have our own scientists, we have our own experts. They work off the land, they live with the land. That place-based knowledge, localized knowledge, not only the whaling captain of the Nupiat people, accumulated knowledge of a whaling captain that doesn't understand why the ice now in certain areas is thinner, it's unpredictable, and the whaling captain losing some whalers because the ice is unpredictable. We're starting to see these kind of impacts. Life itself, the ecosystem is unpredictable. The weather is unpredictable. So we understand that something is wrong. Something is out of balance. As Indigenous peoples that I've talked to, what do? We go back to what we've been told we have to do. We have to continue to have ceremony. We have to continue to strengthen our language, because that language is important. That allows us to understand on the reciprocal level, to talk to the plants, talk to nature, but also that nature can understand us. So, the Indigenous worldview is what I'm talking about. To some of you, this may not be new. It may not be new. Some of this may be new to you. I don't know. Water takes me back when I was receiving that the Gandhi Peace Award. And there was bottled water right over here on my side on the table. And it was like, I couldn't keep on talking. I just had to do something. I reached over to that bottled water and I broke the cap open and I drank it. And I said, I freed the water. The water was held in captive. But that's what we're doing. Indigenous Rising is telling the truth. It may not be what the world wants to hear. It may be not something you want to hear. Maybe humanity only wants to hear from the indigenous woman and the man to talk about beads and feathers, to dance, to give us grant money so that we can talk about how resilient we are. Or to give a grant to Tom Goldtooth and the Indigenous Environmental Network and say, don't challenge carbon markets. Don't challenge cap and trade. Don't go there. But we'll give you a grant for adaptation because your people have traditional knowledge. But you notice in the trailer, we use the word systems change. In order to deal with climate crisis, we're seeing in that collective group of our indigenous peoples through ceremony who have a strong relationship to land, we're not dealing with any issues of assimilation or acculturation. We know who we are. Some of us come from a long family of resistance. But colonization and everything it stands for, including the economic system that preys upon life itself, an economic system of unlimited growth, an economic system that has no respect for the spirit of song, that has no respect for the spirit of Mother Earth, or the spirit of the trees, or the spirit of the air, the spirit of the salmon. An economic system that has no respect for the spirit of the indigenous peoples, because we are a threat. What kind of economic system am I talking about? Call it out. What? I can't hear you. All right. So our Indigenous Environmental Network, we've been in the trenches with our communities, the front line, lifting up their voices. The Black Mesa Water Coalition and the younger generation at Big Mountain with Peabody Coal. Already my generation, and we were the younger ones, and the older generation, we're already being entrenched, being pulled and yanked. We had all these people coming from all over the world, New York City, France, everywhere. This is your answer and your solution. You come with me. Someone else said, no, you come with me. This is the answer and this is the solution. Before you know it, families are being pulled apart, trying to stop Peabody Coal Mining Company. Big money was coming in order to organize. But if you look at the big money created for environmentalism, very little of that money ever goes to the community to build the strength and empower the people to take control and to take action. But it was the younger generation that stepped in, Hopi, Dene, Navajo, along with brothers and sisters, Chicana, Chicano, white folks, youth, the Black Mesa Water Coalition, and they focused on water. The aquifer was drying up. And they flipped the script. So part of the maturity of the environmental justice movement within Indian country, within Indigenous, is that we're starting to go deep in our critical analysis of how we do things. on building the strength of our communities in resistance that has a foundation with our spiritual values and our spiritual beliefs, and to confront the symptoms of colonization, and one of those I talked about earlier, internalized oppression. Internalized oppression so that we become our worst enemy. The man doesn't have to do anything, he can just step back and we'll tear apart our own. So as we're starting to look at different ways that we organize and build from an indigenous perspective of our communities, our nations, our villages, flipping the script. We have to find ways to give language to something that is internalized, because we are in grief, we have historical trauma, psychological, social, spiritual, physical. It's not an easy task to unpackage that. But it's part of the gift that our younger generation have, and it's part of the prophecies of the seventh generation, are with our Anishinaabe, Ojibwe people, the Algonquin people. They have that concept of the seventh fire. This generation that's coming up. You see that generation in the film, the elders and the youth. Philip Deere was ahead of his time when he said we need to bring the elders and the youth together in Oklahoma. But that did help and take root to many of us of my generation. I was 19 once when I was here in this area. Uncle Sam got a hold of me. I didn't think Uncle Sam was going to get a hold of me. I was a free spirit. But Uncle Sam has his threatening ways. Where was I going to go? So I did time. I did time at Fort Lewis. But we organized at Fort Lewis as the Indian Soldier Boys. And there were women also in the military. But a lot of these soldier boys helped out his mom, his dad, Nisqually people, because that was the training ground. Tanks, missiles going over their territories. Militarization and everything it stands for. Threatening our own relatives here. And the Indian soldier boys standing up. And those concepts of dog soldiers were always there. Our warriors, our protectors, our peacemakers. Our peacemakers. So from that young man, 19 years old, I learned a lot in this area. I learned a lot. I see many things. No different than my home. No different. And to see the beautiful strength in the song and his son, that's the younger generation. My sons and my daughters. Some of you have your sons and daughters, the younger generation. So those were some of the concepts when we talked about this road to Paris and beyond. And we listed out those areas. Paris, United States, has a clean power plant. Looks good. But you need to look into what it means. It has cap and trade in there again. cap and trade. I cannot do any justice to try to even begin to talk about what cap and trade is. It's not just a 4-hour workshop. It's not just a 4-day, summit. It involves unpackaging up a lot of things that has its roots in capitalism. One of the challenges that we have here in the United States within our social justice movement, our environmental justice movement, our poverty rights movements, women's movements, youth movements, if we're against capitalism, what are we for? Are we for the creation of a hybrid model of capitalism? Are we for socialism? What are we for? What are we fighting for then? But we know in our heart, in our mind, that we have an economic system that is not sustainable. It's already the overfishing in the oceans. The reports that came out here in Puget Sound with the tribes and Evergreen's assistance about the impact of a changing environment and the relationship of the culture here with the oceans. It doesn't look good. And then what I see in the Paris Agreement that's being drafted, the target levels for the reduction
Lost audio again. We'll get it back.
I don't know how much time I have. If I have 7 minutes. I'm going to show you this clip that we did with our friends in the Bay Area, not working with breaking news, but they call themselves mending news. While he's putting it up, I hope this gives you a snapshot of what I've been talking about. Carbon market.
Red is a perverse paradigm and it's not about forest protection, it's about forest destruction, and we know you will not be tricked. Estamos seguros que lo que ellos buscan correr es apoderarse de nuestros bosques, de nuestra agua, cuando al contrario de apoyar, lo que quieren es convertirnos en áreas confiadas para los ricos y sacar a los pobres, a los campesinos, para que ellos no tengan recursos.
My name is Tom Goldtooth. I'm the Executive Director of the Indigenous Environmental Network and we're an international Indigenous-based environmental justice and economic justice organization networking with Indigenous peoples worldwide. We're based here in the belly of the beast of the United States. We're dealing with an emerging issue here that's really perverse. It involves the financial institutions of the world the oligarchies of the world. It involves multinational corporations. It involves the northern countries, and specifically industrialized countries, pushing forward to a next level economic globalization that is nothing but privatization of nature.
RED, according to the United Nations, stands for Reducing Emissions from Deforestation and Forest Degradation. But really what RED means is reaping profits from evictions, land grabs, deforestation, and destruction of biodiversity.
E um dos impactos que traz RED sobre a questão do território é que há mais de 12 anos no estado do Acre, as terras indígenas não está sendo mais demarcada pelo governo.
We're dealing with this issue of RED, carbon trading, carbon offset, that leaves our companies, these companies that are operating in our backyard, off the hook.
Carbon trading is a scheme to privatize the sky and set up a trading mechanism whereby polluters can buy and sell permits to pollute even more. Specifically, RED is an offset mechanism which uses the forests in the global south as sponges for northern industrialized countries' pollution. So the idea is that if I grab these forests in the global south as sponges for my pollution, I can keep polluting in, say, California. RED is the pillar of what is being called the green economy, which is nothing more than capitalism of life.
We're reading fancy ads that these corporations are paying for that make them look green. Greenwashing the pollution around local toxic hotspots such as the tar sands in northern Alberta, where the Cree, the Dene, and the Métis people are being killed. The water's contaminated. One of the most carbon-intensive developments in the world, destructive, ripping out trees, tearing into Mother Earth, contaminating the water. You can even see it from the satellite.
Chevron, California's biggest polluter, is doing RED in the Atlantic forests of Brazil in conjunction with General Motors and the Nature Conservancy. This RED project uses armed guards. These armed guards, called Força Verde, the Green Force, is shooting at local residents and jailing people. Antonio Alves, a local resident, was jailed for 11 days for cutting down a tree to fix his mother-in-law's leaky roof. So this is indicative of what RED in AB 32, California's climate law, could be. And obviously it is just a scam for the biggest polluters of California to get out of reducing their emissions at source.
Before you can trade anything and treat anything as a commodity, you have to determine who owns that. So who owns the carbon, the air, whether it's in the trees, in the soil, in the plants, in the air? Whose property right is that? As Indigenous peoples, many of us embrace the colorful vision, the spirituality, the sacred relationship that we hold dear to who we are, especially our relationship to the sacredness of Mother Earth. These are values and ethics that guide us, but unfortunately, humanity doesn't quite recognize those values. So that's why part of our campaign is also to wake up the world about who you are and your relationship with Mother Earth, because what's happening here is that the air is being traded off. It's becoming the private property of the industry.
RED is a plan to steal your future. It increases climate change. It makes global warming worse. It sends us over the cliff.
And in consultation with our medicine people, there was a consistency in their response that RED is a manipulation of the sacred, that it's evil,
It'll be absolutely fundamental that youth educate themselves about the Red Menace and stand up and fight back in alliance with Indigenous peoples and local communities and Californian voters and civil societies to stop red and protect Mother Earth.
Where's the off switch? I know about Facebook. Okay, just a couple more minutes and I want to open up for some questions and answers. We work with a group called ETC as well. So it's a group of people, some from Canada, UK, different parts of the world. They've been studying what I've been talking about. But they've been kind of looking at the technologies as far as the false solutions of technologies. And one thing that we have a consensus of, and this is where we need to start looking in the future. For one thing, in IEN, in our analysis of the situation, the petroleum companies, the oil industry, fossil fuel industry, they're not going to turn their valve off. They're going to still continue to burn every drop of oil. They're even pursuing unconventional oil, as you know. That's the hydrofracking, the shale oil, shale gas, tar sands, and they're going offshore now. Coal, liquid natural gas terminals, they're going for it. These other mitigation solutions and mechanisms like carbon markets, yes, they are a scam, but it allows them to continue to do what they're doing and allows business as usual. So, but one of these days in the future, as they burn up every last drop of fossil fuels, then what is the next source of energy? What's the next source? We have to look at that, and there is a reality to it. In America, we do have addiction to energy. We take it for granted when we turn on the light switch that it's bright. We waste a lot in America. Our consumption levels are just outrageous. It's part of the American dream. So when we run out of fossil fuels, where is the system, where is the matrix going to go to next? They're going to already planning for a bioeconomy of bioenergy, tree plantations, genetically engineered plants and crops, vegetation of bioenergy. Imagine the need as we continue to escalate our demand for energy in this country, of the vast amount of acreage and land that is going to be needed to generate enough of that plant, trees, in order to feed the system. So I talked about this privatization of nature. Even though civil society mobilized strategically at Rio de Janeiro at the Rio Plus 20 years after the Earth Summit in 1992, to protest against this plan of privatization of nature. The matrix didn't stop. They're still proceeding forward. Even in the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, they didn't listen. They're still pursuing this path that involves market systems. Like I said in that film, before you can bring any of these trees and now soil sequestration, climate smart agriculture, that is actually one of the methodologies that's coming out of the United Nations negotiations that involves genetically engineered crops, climate friendly corn and crops, but now also soil so that you don't have to turn the soil. But the investors in this scheme are the polluting industry that are buying up these vast acres of land, hectares of land in Africa. At the end of the day, who owns the land? At the end of the day, who owns the trees? The trees no longer have standing. The question was, do they have standing in the first place? They're being bought up through privatization. You got to determine whose property right that is before you bring that into a trading mechanism. Carbon is being traded. Now methane is going to be traded in California. They're developing protocols for trading methane. Dry ricing. California and the United States worked out a deal with China on cap and trade. They're going to Paris on this friendship deal. They're going to look good on paper saying, we're cutting down back our emissions. Cap and trade is part of that mechanism. It involves carbon capitalism, privatization. There's no way around that. In preparation that I feel 50 years, 100 years, is this vast ownership and privatization of land. In Manitoba and Saskatchewan, the government has already inventoried conservation offsets and biodiversity offsets. In Europe, they're pursuing biodiversity offsets. So that's what is happening. And those were prophecies and warnings that were told to us when I was a young man. It wasn't said exactly in that way, but now I understand when they're even going to sell the air. So that's the challenge for the younger generation. Don't be co-opted. The need is to come back, reevaluate what your relationship is to the sacredness of Mother Earth and the female created principle of Mother Earth. In accepting the Gandhi Award, I said the world is at war with Mother Earth. The world rapes Mother Earth. The world doesn't respect the female created principle of Mother Earth. They treat Mother Earth as if she's in liquidation. They treat Mother Earth as if she doesn't have a soul. Does that sound all too familiar? So it's deep and it's heavy, and that's what's happening. It's not too much different than the movie Matrix. It isn't. At least we have something that we can do with computers, we can shut them off. So we have to really come back to community, make a just transition to localization of our energy systems, develop concepts of energy democracy, develop our food systems, not food security, but food sovereignty. Grow our own food, whether you're in the city or in the rural area or on a reservation. Our health system is all linked the happiness index. We pulled that out from one of our brothers from Bangladesh or somewhere over there, developed the concept of a happiness index. Things like that. We have the tools that will develop principles of perpetual care for Mother Earth and all life and for future generations and for humanity. And to start implementing policies that respect the rights of future generations. These are all articulated into a lot of our indigenous instructions. When Roberta Blackgold from our Diné people went to Geneva, she said in her intervention on big mountain issues, she's here to speak for those that cannot speak for themselves. She's talking about the earth bundle, the soil in the earth bundle, talking about the lungs of Mother Earth, talking about the life of the plants. She recognized that earth has rights. The river has rights. But they're going to fight us. Evo Morales presented the rights of nature in Geneva. The United States had no time for that. They are threatened. The matrix is threatened when we challenge their property rights regime and we start to mobilize towards a concept of earth jurisprudence. Earth jurisprudence. The territorial integrity of Mother Earth, as Tupac Iriki puts out on his messages from Tonatera in Phoenix, the territorial integrity of Mother Earth, and challenging the doctrines of discovery who wants to keep Mother Earth and humanity, but indigenous people specifically, in bondage. Because they took that away from the people in Europe. They erased their identity. They destroyed that umbilical cord that tied the people to the land, the woman of the lake. They erased it. If you rebel, off with your head. Industrialization, mercantilism, commodification, privatization, capitalism, militarization, they're all colonization, they're all these concepts. So you're on the right track. So my relatives, thank you very much. Thank you very much. So in respect, real quick here, for the song, I'm going to give a song back. You can all stand. Way ya, way ya, way yo, ho, ho, yo, way, hey, hey, yo. Way ya, way yo, ho, ho, yo, yo. Way ya, hey, 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 hey. Way ya, way yo, ho, ho. That song, as interpreted to me by Bitaka Yuhamani, it's a song that you cast out You cast down in your mind, in your heart, in your prayer, your spirit, to a far place, far away and sacred. A sacred place of the great mystery, Wakantanka. And there's a want that we have as a human being, as a humble man and a humble woman. There's a want and a desire that you will receive a message back, that you will be recognized and acknowledged by the great mystery. A great mystery that created Unchimaka, Grandmother Earth, Father Sky. That is the essence as you look into the star nations. And you're looking at the dew in the morning, the water, moisture on the flowers. All this, the creative principles of the natural laws of the great mystery, great spirit. That song is that and more than that. And I felt the beauty, the holiness, and the humbleness of those teachings in the songs that they shared, to activate the spirit, to honor the spirit of life. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tom Goldtooth, for a very poignant talk, very important message that we all needed to hear, and many others around the world need to hear as well. I'd like to invite Sarah from the Resource Rebels program to present a gift and to show our appreciation. And while that is happening, I want to remind all of you that the symposium is not over, and tomorrow we have a number of events, including a fossil fuels connection panel that happens in the morning, and workshops focused on what tangible actions we can take. So please do come back, and we do have some time for questions. We can go until 9:30. I'd invite anyone who has questions to please raise your hand, and we'll bring the microphone over to you. In light of the fact that we have 25 minutes before the session comes to an end, I would like to request you to please keep your questions concise, and please hold off on any comments that you might want to make, and let's use the time we have to ask questions of our guest speaker. There's a question from Freddie Lane over here.
Just jump up and say it, Freddie. Thank you, and thank you for your words, Tom. Thank you. My question comes from the many Indian cultures in Indian country that stem, as we just recently seen, the largest hurricane on the west coast of the United States and Mexico there. And my question is, of all your travels and of all the teachings that you've heard from many of our elders on the great purification and how that that concept of how the earth, if we don't take care of the earth is going to take care of itself. I just wanted to ask you, Ms. Campbell.
Must have been about, I think it was 1995, 96. I was talking one time about protecting Mother Earth. And it stimulated a response from two elders. And they said, when you say protecting Mother Earth, you're putting yourself into a position that maybe you shouldn't go there, you know. It made me think about it. I still use it, but often with the qualifier, because I've been to different places. I've had this discussion with the Khoisan people, the bush people, bushmen, bushwomen in South Africa, in Kimberley, in a small little settlement called Kimberley. As you fly into Kimberley, there's a big open pit. There's a big hole in the ground. It's a diamond mine. Okay. And so I was talking, we were trading medicines. The Khoisan people, they have a big bazaar, they have a big flea market. They bring their herbs and their roots, and so I was there and I discovered some root that's related to the Sinkpe Tawote that we have in the Great Lakes, bitter root. And I made it, and it tastes just like bitter root, but it was a lot stronger. So we talked about it, and we're talking about the Mother Earth. And they said that the Mother Earth, they said, we're worried, they said. What are you worried about? We're worried about ourselves. Because we can't defend ourselves. Mother Earth is shaking herself. The thunders, I was there when the thunders came. The thunders are like their genesis. The thunders are really so strong that it trembles the Mother Earth. And some of the genesis of our story talks about when the thunder beams were so strong, the whole earth would tremble. South Africa, I was in Johannesburg. They're trying to do away with the city of Johannesburg and build a whole nother city, Babylon, called Sandton. It's a gated city. And the whole Holiday Inn, where this United Nations conference was at, United Nations, I mean Hilton conference, the building shook. And I said, why is the building shaking? He said, that's the thunders when they come. So the tribal people are worried because it's not their doing, but it's the doing of the outside world. And then when I was visiting some people from Vanuatu in the Pacific, and they were talking about this too. And they were talking about, they're worried too. Mother Earth is going to do what she's going to do. And it's us that are vulnerable people. So, over in Minnesota, one of the tribes depleted their fish because it's that capitalism. They overfished. They had 10, 20-mile nets. 10-mile nets. You can make more money, you can drive fancy cars. But the elder, one of the spiritual leaders said, the people are forgetting to put prayers up. Because if you forget to put prayers up and conduct your ceremony, you wouldn't think like that. You wouldn't do things like that. You would understand your relationship to the sacredness of the water and the fish. But we're forgetting to put tobacco. Something as simple as forgetting to put tobacco. Or on the Navajo side, the Nez side, corn pollen offering. Some of you have different offerings. Some people have shells and stones. If we forget to do that, then, it's going to be more difficult for us. That's the truth. It's going to be more difficult. It was the Billies that told me that. You know, they always, the Billies in Florida, the independent sovereign Seminoles, they always want to tell the truth, even if you don't want to know, hear it. You know, but they say you're going to hurt yourself. Man's going to hurt themselves because they're not doing what they're supposed to do. Corbin Harney, one of our advisors, a holy man from the New Way Sopapia, the Western Shoshone, he, at his gatherings, he used to wake everyone up before the sun comes up. So now we have a new generation. It doesn't depend on what culture or what race you are. They sleep till noon these days. Okay? They're on Facebook. It's 4 in the morning. Or they're doing other things with their gadgets. So he gets everyone up. But he does this not only because that's the way that he's been taught, but he intentionally does that to everyone as a teaching, because his songs that he sings, he wakes up the stones, he wakes up the roots and the plants. Out there, some people think it's a desert that it has no life. It's very lively, you know. So he does that. That's why to us, ceremony is very important. Continuing to conduct our ceremonies. This matrix that I talked about that's out there. I wish I knew who they were. I wish I knew who these entities are, these people. But they don't want us to live. We are the truth as indigenous peoples of the land. They have that world globe, that map. They know where these fires are burning, whether it's in Southeast Asia, in the mountains of Tibet, the Khoisan people, some of the Kogi in the mountains of Colombia. They know where these strong fires are at, and they want those fires to be put out. They want those people not to survive because it's that truth, those indigenous ways that those fires are a threat to the matrix. You know, that's just not my paranoia, you know. And I'm starting to talk like John Trudell, my friend. But he puts words to everything, too, that we're talking about. The predator instinct. That gave us ammunition where we say, yeah, I never had language for that. Now I understand. So we have these poets out there. Now we have a younger generation that are rapping. Matami Nez Meads, Russell's one who's younger. I heard him rap in Paris at one of the meetings we had as preparatory for Paris. He's got it. His political orientation and the way he expresses. And I gave him our materials about false solutions and this privatization. He gets it. Hopefully in the future he's going to be rapping about that. Yeah. Another question, please. Someone, I don't know who.
I have a question. First of all, I just want to thank you for all of your words of wisdom. And that I just want to share with you that in my teachings, we have long hair. My mother taught me that we have long hair to remember that our old people suffered so we could be here. And so you speak a lot of the same words that I've been taught. But I want to try and ask you a question about constitutional laws, state laws or federal laws and policies, and how it pertains to under power. So I want to attempt to explain my question. We all know that Lady Liberty, she provides a balance of justice for both sides. And so when you're speaking of these corporations going in and making these offset carbon emission laws in California, the AB 32, I wanted to know what type of barriers are in place, you know, fees or fines to slow down this signing of these contracts with Indigenous peoples, Aboriginal peoples, because as a tribal member here in Washington, our council signed, and they're saying they have this power to do these large negotiations without consulting the people. And that in our constitution, in my tribal constitution, it's supposed to be brought in front of the people before it's negotiated. And so I just want to know how you guys are addressing this issue, so that way I can try to bring some good news back to my people and share with them that this is a concern, a global concern for the Indigenous people.
Yes. We came together in 1990 in response to what I talked about earlier. And the foundation of our Indigenous Environmental Network are grassroots people. We've had elected tribal governments taking part in our gatherings, like Protecting Mother Earth gatherings. But our foundation are our traditional societies. One of the founders of IEN is Jim Maine Sr., the Gorlon Nation in Montana, dealing with gold mining issues. Jim Maine Sr. And his foundation and his accountability is through their society, White Clay Society. White Clay goes back before colonization. So that's their structure of decision making and governance, is their societies. And it's not an easy response because of that internalized oppression that we have. We want to also recognize our sovereignty. This modern day sovereignty, jurisdictional issues, jurisdictional platforms that we talk about, our government-to-government relationship, policies that we continue to advocate and fight for with the United States. We may deny even consultation with our elected government. But a lot of people don't know that we had our traditional forms of governance that was completely erased and not recognized in, what was it, 1936, 35, the Indian Reorganization Act was a new form of governance called electoral governance, electoral politics. And all of you are familiar with electoral. That was totally foreign for us and replaced our traditional form of governance. As IEN, we embrace as a just transition to be able to have an island of freedom so that we can have our own respectful debates and critical analysis about where are we going as Indigenous people, as tribes, as nations, as community for the next 100 years, the next 7 generations. That means that we have to examine these instruments that have been imposed on us, our modern governance structures. And it is a struggle. Guy White Thunder, again, one of our founders, is a Lakota elder, and he's one of the most sharp intellectuals of the treaty rights of the Lakota people. But he speaks about that in Lakota, intellectual in Lakota. And so it loses a lot of its meaning when he speaks it in English. But they took over their tribal government a couple of years back, trying to instill their traditional governments. So there are some movements like that to re-examine where we're at. Consultation internally, we have systems again where we have ways that we communicate to each other and we make decisions as families. But those were a long time ago, and what happened to those systems and how do we bring them back? That's some really important questions. And I think there are some people here that talk about this too. And, on one hand, our network is very supportive, and we defend the sovereignty of the people. But it's something that we want to have more discussion on that issue. it's not an easy answer to it because it really cuts into the heart when we have leadership that doesn't consult our own people. But we need to continue to have compassion and also those principles of how we work within our families and to love each other, because that matrix really just wants us to tear apart each other. It hurts me in California with the casinos sometimes. Whole families are disenrolled, disenrolled, They no longer have recognition, but they're native because of politics. So, yes, but I think ceremony has a lot to do with it too, is the revitalization of our language and ceremonies, and bringing back those teachings. Very important. Any other questions?
Hello, it's a blessing to be in your presence and all. And my name is Ibrahim, and I'm trying to indigenize my eyes, these concepts of indigeneity in place and time. And I'm trying to challenge the status quo by bringing up front indigenous pathways to empowerment. So I consider my perception as a permaculture engineer is that humanity needs a new path to new lifeways, and indigenous infrastructure like the Chinampa system, traditional ecological knowledge, can possibly provide those pathways for people to find themselves their time to be human. So the question is, from your travels, have you come across a community that demonstrates a sustainable ecological lifeway for the urban, rural lifestyle to adopt so we can maybe meet or exceed the UN challenge and promote this indigenous lifestyle, because it is about influence for the younger generation? I'll take my question.
What I'm seeing is that there are families that are doing these things, and we support that, families who are doing these things. And something I mentioned earlier is how do we do that and expand that as a tribe, as a government, we're going to start working with a tribe in North Dakota around the concepts of just transition, around addressing the issues of what does green economy mean to them, but also take responsibility because, like you say, I've been traveling throughout the world, and we have other people that we have bumped into who are native and some that are not native, that are doing very, very innovative things, and even the way that they construct their housing, their homes, and how they create jobs, employment that is a different concept of employment, and how they're integrating their traditional belief system, their values, and spirituality, and have ceremony in their decision-making process. Their food systems, revitalizing their seed banks, and some of the people of Thunder Valley, some of the younger generation of Thunder Valley, the Oglala Lakota people, they're doing some of those things with CDC funding. But one of the communities that we want to work with, and we've already got agreement, a buy-in from them, they want to attempt to do this, is the Fort Berthold Indian community, the 3 affiliated tribes, the Mandan, Harikara, and Hidatsa. Mandan, Hidatsa, and Harikara. They're right there at ground zero with fracking. The water's getting contaminated. There's some families who are millionaires now, and there's some families in poverty that in principle did not take any money. But they want to make a change. They want to start bringing in and doing things because they're concerned about their future generation. They want to start implementing the laws at the community level that recognizes the rights of the water. the rights of the earth, the rights of the plants, so that those are integrated into their decision-making process. Concepts of how they build their homes and their carbon footprint, things like that. So we're very inspired by that. And again, there's families that we have, that I've run into, who are doing things on a family, as an individual family level. But how do we incorporate that on a community level, a community scale? That's the challenge. And localized energy systems. How do we do that? And there's different grid systems to do that, you know. So it's going to take a lot of people, a lot of challenges to do that, and to break that mindset that has been created, not just within us, but with all America, is how do we decolonize ourselves, that this is possible. One of the alliances we're part of is the Climate Justice Alliance, that also includes the Grassroots for Global Justice. We have our Power campaign, where we're working with communities, and Black Mesa Water Coalition is one of those communities where we're starting to do things like that. When they're Black within their organization, we're working with communities like that in localized energy systems, solar and small scale wind, not utility scale energy. So it's a good question, and there still needs to be some sort of a sounding board, a place where people can go to look at these different things that are very innovative to do. I think, is that maybe one more question? One more. The light just went out and on. I remember that. And the lights go in off and on. Yeah, you gotta get your package to go. Okay, one more question, yes.
Yeah, my name is Kiara, and I wanted to thank you for speaking to the power of spirit being able to show you the truth, and how we can get pulled different ways and compromise there. And my question is, in light of being in, yes, the heart of the Salish Sea, and yes, near the heart of the Nisqually, we're also in the heart of an empire, and in the heart of a business as usual mindset that was at least perpetuated onto me. And so I'm wondering how, in those spaces where we are amidst business as usual and these capitalistic mindsets, and it's really hard to speak the truth and to hold the truth, or even to remember the truth, how can we learn to pull that in, learn to hold space for the truth, that our oceans are rapidly acidifying, and that our glaciers are receding, and that Indigenous people are having their land stolen. So yeah, if you could speak to that, I would be honored to hear your insights.
Some people have asked me, how do you do what you're doing, and then you keep calm? For me, I would not be able to survive in doing this kind of work if I didn't have ceremony, if I didn't have a purification lodge to go into, that puts me to rights. If we didn't have our annual Sundance, that's our new year, that's my new year. So for me, ceremony is very important for that, so that I'm not overwhelmed, because we're taking on something that has power. It has power. It has spirit. And in some of our areas, that spirit is very powerful. It takes our children. Suicide. They're even hearing that voice. You're not nothing. You're nobody. No one loves you. Now that entity we're fighting has spirit to it. So that's why for us, ceremony is very important. Hope that's helpful. Yeah, thank you very much.
sharing generously of your time and knowledge. Thank you everyone for being here, and we look forward to seeing you again tomorrow at 10. Good night.
Okay, so that was our last Indigenous, or our Indigenous Climate Justice Symposium keynote speaker, Tom Goldtooth. We will be broadcasting tomorrow's panel. I'd like to thank Rich Green for providing us with the live feed. He did an amazing and outstanding job considering what he has to work with there. I believe, John, you had something you wanted to say before we sign off? Or no?
You don't want to take any questions? Are there any questions you'd like to address?
Yeah, are there any questions?
Yes, we have a couple of questions.
Okay.
Hannah Bernana asks, whatever happened to the Animas River that was polluted by that mine breach a few months back? What damage did it do, or is it still doing, and what legal actions are being taken against the EPA for it?
Well, what damage it did do was it completely decimated the year's corn crop for the Navajo. There were parts of the reservation that were left completely without water. The water tankers that were contracted to bring water to the reservation for livestock and for people were contaminated with fracking waste, and the water was unusable. It's still an ongoing issue. The Native Network News online has been reporting on this steadily. It'll be up to the Navajo president and their council to determine what the next best steps are to take. But yeah, it did a lot of damage. All the stuff that was in that water was heavy metals. They aren't going to go away. They sunk down into the soil of the river and along the river. Every time there's a flood, every time the water rises and then falls and then rises again, there'll be recontamination of that river. This will be an ongoing problem for a long time. And let's see, Simone, why can't we learn more about Native heritage in public school? Why do I have to go to summer school on a res to learn? Are there people who are fighting for this? This depends on what state you're in. As I mentioned, Washington State, the tribes have managed to push through legislation through Washington State to have Native history and culture and government taught in the schools at an age-appropriate level between K through 12. And there are some areas where, yes, it's being fought for, and there are other areas where it's not. There's some states that don't have reservations on them. It's even our local here in D.C., where the National Congress of the American Indian meets and is held and has its home base throughout the month of November, which is Native American History Month. There will be absolutely zero, zilch, nothing on the TV about Native Americans at all. This is not only a problem in the schools, it's a problem in the media. We are invisible, and that's probably why we're so sensitive about the cultural appropriation. and stereotypes is because when you're invisible, when the truth of you is invisible, and that all people know are your stereotypes, then you become a joke. You're not taken seriously. All the Indians are dead, or you all have casinos, or you don't pay taxes. All those other myths become what's considered accepted knowledge rather than the truth.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Someone earlier in the chat was asking about the music that they're playing at the beginning, and they want to know, are they saying particular words, or is that just a chant, and they want to know what that means?
Okay, the people who were doing the welcoming songs in the Squally family drum group, there's two different kinds of songs. I'll back up. In Native American culture, you have the songs with words, and then you have songs with no words that are equivalent to la 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 la. The ones that they were singing in the beginning were songs with words. I don't speak Nisqually, so I don't know what they were singing. It was billed on the program as welcoming songs, so I'm assuming that they were welcoming everyone to the space and extending their hospitality, and that's fairly pro forma in almost every native tribe. The song that Tom's Goldtooth sung, that was one of those that's without words. And you don't have permission to sing songs without words unless you're told what that song is about. Because even though it doesn't have any words, and the reason it doesn't is so it can be shared between one set of speakers and, you know, like English to Spanish or whatever. These songs don't have words, but they have a story attached. And songs are very important. They're one of the few things that can be considered property in a native mindset. They have a spirit. They are a living thing, which someday we'll get into, because the language that I speak is all based on whether something is considered sentient or non-sentient, alive or not alive. And there's lots of things that we consider alive that fly in the face of the way that they're constructed in English. Are airwaves more free? What do you mean by that, Lauren? Let me switch to the chat so I can actually see what's going on here. Lauren asks, are the airwaves more free? I don't know if you would consider the airwaves more free or not. I mean, if you're talking about broadcasting, things in the corporate world are the same way for us as they are for Bernie Sanders or any other anti-corporate thing. So Grandma says that songs come to her. She sings them when I wake up. Every morning I do what my grandfather did. Is that I'm up at dawn, whether I'm still up from the night before, like Tom said, the young people on the computers all night, or whether I get up on purpose, and even if it's just to get up and sing to the sunrise and be grateful for this wonderful, awesome thing called life. Most people take that for granted. They look out and they see a tree, they see the grass, they see the sky, and it's, you know, those are just words. They're always there, or, you know, what's so special about them? Oh, what's so special about being alive? But if you sit and you think about that concept of being alive, it's something that I am grateful for. And in the morning I sing songs, and I give tobacco, and I have a flute. I play my flute, and I also do the same thing in the evening. When the sun goes down, the stars come out. And no, it's not wrong. If you feel that this is something you should do, then you should do it. So anything else? Anybody else?
The only other question that I'm seeing from the chat is they want to know if anyone from the group has looked at the TPP today. And I myself have been gone all day and have not gotten a chance to see it. Have you gotten a chance to read that, Pat?
No, I've got some things bookmarked. I understand that the full text of the TPP is out, but I have a day job, and then I went from my day job to preparing for this, so I haven't had a chance to do much of anything at all with it.
I'm sure we'll follow up on that on a later show.
Absolutely, guys.
And John, someone was asking about the Indiegogo and if it had been posted on Reddit. They said that they're on there a lot and they hadn't seen it. So did you want to address that?
Sure. Yeah. Wow, my camera's all weird off and strange. Hey, everybody. Let's make sure I'm not echoing here. So I don't know that if we're on Reddit, we're a little shorthanded in the social realm in terms of Reddit. I think it is. I think I saw actually one of the lower thirds come through that said it was on Reddit. Let me just show you what's going on here. There you go. So this is our solution to having YouTube shut us down. This is our solution to being able to broadcast things like that TED Talk that we actually had permission to broadcast, but YouTube shut us down for it anyway. This gives us autonomy. You guys help me get this equipment, and I guarantee you a feed from anywhere we stick it, and YouTube can't shut us down. Corporate media can't shut us down. Nobody can shut us down. They can send me legal letters. They can get mad at me, but you can't shut us down. And this is our solution. This is please go to networkofthe99.com. Watch the video. This is an overarching nonprofit that will provide resources to channels like Birdie 2016 TV and other channels. Native Life is one of many programs that I want to run on a channel for humanity. And this seed money will be the beginning of that. It provides for the autonomous stream. It provides for a lot of other technology that we use for this channel specifically, and it gives me the freedom to create a nonprofit that we all can use to broadcast what we want, uncensored, unfiltered by corporate media. And the last thing I want to show you here is this. These are the first 30 people that donated in the last 2 days. I really want to thank everybody. We sent this out. Take a look at it when you can. I don't want to hijack this show too much longer, but I really appreciate everybody who has helped us out so far. And anybody in social media that can do anything for us at this point, we're really shorthanded in that regard. And if somebody else can get it on Reddit or whatever, that would be great. I really appreciate it. Back to you, Pat.
Okay. Well, excuse me. To wrap things up, tomorrow's panel is at 10 in the morning. If you're able to tune in, fine. If you're not, as always, we'll have a recording of it. Next week, if you're just going to join us next week, is Veterans Day, and we're going to have a show about Native American veterans. And the song that you're going to hear as we go out is a song by Byron Nicholai. He is Yupik from Alaska. The song's name is I Am Yupik, and it talks about all the various people that live in Alaska and how everyone should be neighbors and friends, and then he ends with he is Yupik. So John, if you want to cue that up, and we'll go ahead and head off into the sunset. And hopefully we'll see y'all tomorrow morning, if not next week.
Yeah. Wangutamore Alaska me Pichiriaga Purayukin Ritu Wangutamani Alaska me Pichiriaga Purayukin Ritu Eachanga Eanga Eachanga Nga yu piu go.
Huge